To our presentation on a journal first paper for transactions in software engineering. And this paper is called An Actionable Framework for Understanding and Improving Developer Experience. And I'm joined today by the first author of this paper, Michaela Greiler, and our other author is also Abby Noda. So developer productivity has been the focus of research for both practitioners and researchers for several decades. And early attempts focused on measuring productivity in terms of lines of code and other simple metrics. But recent research has pushed back against these simple metrics with extensive research to understand which factors impact developer productivity. But more recent research proposed that developer productivity is elusive and it's actually quite hard to define. And developers are, for example, quite likely to define it in terms of the activities they do, while managers think more in terms of performance. But some developers also think about productivity in terms of their collaboration and how they help others, while others are more focused on thinking about productivity in terms of having uninterrupted work. The problem with some of these ways of measuring productivity, however, is that developers feel like they're being measured as cogs in a wheel. And they're not happy about this, and industry has recognized it. And because of that, they're focusing more on developer satisfaction and their experience, which, by the way, has also been shown to correlate quite highly with perceived developer productivity. So in our work, we were interested in understanding what does developer experience refer to, how can we measure it, and how can we understand developer experience so that ultimately we could look at how to improve. To start off with, my colleague and I, we're going to role play a little bit. I'm Amy, and this is Becky, and we both work for a thriving social media company called Scoom. And we've recently been taken over in a hostile takeover of our company. So Becky, you and I have been working for this company for a long time. What do you think about how things have been going since we've been taken over?
I have been a little bit shaken by it. I don't know how you feel, but it was a lot, right? I'm not sure they really have the same value as we have. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I also feel the same way. I feel that our values are not what they're not the same. They don't align with the company.
Everything has
Um,
to go so fast, right?
yeah, totally.
And I'm
Um,
also worried about the code base. I don't have really time to do something about the technical debt, and we are acquiring a lot right now.
oh,
At the same
I used to have a lot of joy when I was developing and I took pride in the work that we were creating. And lately it's just, I don't know, I just feel like they don't care about it. The requirements keep changing and I don't see what we can do. Do you see anything we can do?
Yeah, I experienced exactly the same. Last time in the retro, I wanted to say something, but then somehow I'm also a little bit scared because they are also, letting people go, and I don't want to be fired over that, right? I obviously want to make a positive change here, but I didn't really dare to speak up.
Yeah, I felt the same way. And I asked our manager, would she speak up? And she said, are you kidding me? If I did that, our whole team could be let go. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I have to be honest. I've been coding at night on another project, an open
yeah.
source project.
Yeah, I don't have the time for that, but I have to say that everything that I normally invest here in the company, I often would really put in more than 100% just to make things better, work on our test environment. But here I just get so much pushback, and I'm also a little bit uneasy if I, can do it, if it's appreciated or not. That, yeah, I don't know. I'm just doing less because I feel less joy here.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, let's come back and talk about this again later.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So back to our presentation. So from this example, we learned that developer experience is really quite nuanced and that to define it, it's quite challenging. And when we started this research, we started with an initial definition by Fagerholm and Munch, where they build on user experience research and they define developer experience in terms of how developers feel about, think about, and value their work. And this definition was a good starting point for us, but we wanted to really have a better actionable framework that would help us guide how we understand and how we would measure developer experience. So to find out about measuring and understanding developer experience, we conducted a semi-structured interview study with 21 developers from different companies. And the interviewed developers have more than 4 years experience, with some having, I think, over 20 years experience from different size companies. And many of the companies were from about 100 to 1,000 developers. Each interview was about 45 to 90 minutes long. We conducted them over Zoom. We recorded them, we transcribed them, and then we analyzed iteratively over different sets of interviews to see what kinds of findings would emerge. And by the way, our interview guide and our ethics procedure are available online. And during our interview, a number of emerging categories emerged, leading us to the research questions that we have here on this slide. In the paper, we give many details on our coding mechanism and how we arrived at our codes and our core categories. And also in the paper, we discuss the threats to credibility and reliability and the steps that we took to mitigate those threats. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Michaela, to talk about the main research output from our research, which is the DevX framework. Over to you, Michaela.
Thank you. Yeah, so the main research output was the DevX framework, developer experience framework. And you can see developer experience in the middle here. And what's coming into the developer experience, or what's impacting developer experience, are the DX factors, the developer experience factors. But they are not standalone. From the sidelines, you see contextual characteristics that emerged from the interviews. I will talk about what they are a little bit later. And then we also saw that there are barriers to improvement, right? That makes it hard for people to improve developer experience. That people talked about the strategies that they have for improving developer experience, and also about their coping mechanisms. And I will look at each of those building blocks of the developer experience framework right now. So let's look at the developer experience factors. We clustered them into 4 main categories, and they are collaboration and culture, product management, developer flow and fulfillment, and development and release. And there are a couple of factors within each of those categories. They're all described in the paper, so if you really want to know each one of them, please check out the paper and read them. But I will present a couple. So collaboration culture is all about supportiveness, how we are with the colleagues. Do we share our knowledge? Do we feel connected? Product management is really about, do we know what we have to do? Do we have clear goals, scope, and requirements? Do we have reasonable deadlines and all of that? Developer flow and fulfillment is, can I do my work in my own pace, right? Is it stimulating and challenging in a positive way, right? Do I have work-life balance? And then development release is all about, the code base, the development environment, and also feedback loop, automated testing, is there frictionless release, and how does the code review process look like? And as I said, there are contextual characteristics that emerged because we were interested in what's the most important developer experience factor. And we asked people about that. And, it was very surprising that there was no clear answer to that. It was not, the code base is the most important one. But instead, people would say, well, it depends on, right? And this depends on where those contextual characteristics that we identified. And so what does it depend on if something is important or not? Well, the presence of problems, right? So at the moment that there are problems in a specific area, this factor becomes really important. So if I'm experiencing problems in friction in the release, this becomes important. There are also other things like expectations or seniority, right? If I'm a junior developer, code-based health might be more important to me than if I'm a senior developer. And for seniors, it might be that it's a product, how product management works, right? Because you are more responsible for the release and meeting deadlines and so on, right? So these contextual factors actually drive the importance of those developer experience factors. And if we come back to the developer experience framework, we also see there's something else, barriers to improvement. What does this mean? So we asked people, so what did you do to improve it? Or people just told us about this. And we saw that there are barriers to improvement that people experience. And it's, for example, low prioritization or the lack of visibility. So for example, this person said, as long as it's not visible in the KPIs, it's not so important for the company and it's hard to make a case for it, right? Yeah, and then there are two more things, that is strategies to improvement, right? And coping mechanisms. Let's look at the strategies to improve developer experience. And we saw there are actually two ways or two kind of strategies. One are individual ones, so that every developer can do themselves. That's, for example, job crafting, so that they are creating their own job. So somebody saw that there's a lot of testing problems, and so they somehow crafted their job a little bit more to be in the test automation area, or taking risk, right? So that I'm doing something even though nobody gave me the permission, or I didn't even ask, right? Team strategies is all about really what can we do as a team, and this is building bridges, right? Reaching out to other teams, for example, creating transparency, convincing others that they are, working with us for a better developer experience. And finally, something that we saw when we are interviewed the developers and coded our information is that people also have coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms is if developer experience is not so good and there are barriers for improvement and people just, are stuck with this negative developer experience, what are they doing? Well, they have coping mechanisms. So this means that they do something else, right? To cope for this negative experience that they have. And one thing is, for example, that a lot of people talked about that they don't care so much anymore, right? That they are disengaging from their work environment. Maybe they focus on personal projects. Maybe they validate negative experience with somebody else, right? Like Becky and Amy did, right? So they are talking about it and they feel better because, well, at least both have negative experience. So it's not about them only. Maybe working overtime. Or no longer speaking up, reducing engagement, gaming the system, leaving the jobs. There are really a lot of different nuances to these coping mechanisms. Well, and that wraps up our DevX framework, right? So we had the factors, then the contextual characteristics that are somehow defining how important something is, a factor is for developer experience. We have the barriers to improvement for developer experience, right? Why people can't really do something about it. We have the strategies that they employ to really change developer experience, and the coping mechanisms, what they do if they are somehow stuck with this negative developer experience. And all of that can be used also to improve developer experience. And what we introduced is to make it actionable is this ask, plan, do cycle, right? So we first ask about developer experience. We have to measure it somehow, right? To understand how is it actually going, how where are problems, roadblocks in our experience. And then we systematically plan to improve developer experience. So what are the steps that we are taking? Let's say, for example, for code-based health to improve or reduce the technical debt, or to make the deadlines more feasible and so on. And then we do it. But then again, we have to ask and see actually what we did, the steps that we did this bring improvement in what areas? And again, we are planning, doing, and asking, right? And this can be done via surveys or in retrospectives and so on. And this also brings me to something else that came out of this research or was initiated by our co-author, Noda, is a startup, getdx.com. It's a tool that helps teams to measure developer experience. So they ask the teams to report on their main pain points and the areas they want to improve, and then discuss those main points with their team, make changes, then rerun the service, and then make the improvements and the changes again. So this is ask, plan, do cycle is really integrated in this tool. And check it out if you're interested. And this brings me more or less to the end, to close the whole report. And Peggy, you want to say something?
Yeah, so that's thanks for going over the framework. We hope that you enjoyed listening about our research and reading about this framework, and that if you are interested in understanding developer experience, it may be useful to you for understanding and measuring and improving developer experience. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Please check out our paper.